Welcome to the Health in Motion podcast. I am your host, Evie Takis. I am a functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner who loves to help people achieve their wellness goals they once thought were impossible to reach. I am the owner of Holistically Restored, and through my coaching practice, I have been able to guide my clients through their own health journeys and teach them to truly understand their body. With a focus on hormone, thyroid, and weight management, I strive to instill the knowledge, confidence, and encouragement everyone deserves. If you enjoy this content, I'd love for you to subscribe and also leave a review on Apple Podcast. Please tell your friends, family, or anyone who is curious about bettering themselves in a holistic way. The more, the merrier. Please keep in mind this podcast is created for educational purposes only and is not to be taken as medical advice. I am so happy you're here and ready to learn. Let's do it. Yeah, so I appreciate you chatting with me today. I'm really excited to talk to you. There's a lot of things about you that really interest me and also resonate with me. I just feel like from the second that I met you, which was almost a year ago at this point, I was like, we seem to be kind of be into the same things, and this is really interesting. And then I started following you on Instagram, and I'm like, hell yeah, like go for those morning walks. Like, that's awesome.
Totally.
To catch everyone up, the way that we met was I met you through a breathwork workshop in Columbus, Ohio. You catered the food, and it was more like a brunch thing. And I'm not like a huge brunch person, but I fell in love with that food that you brought. And I was just really, really interested in that. And I also knew that you were into the cold plunges and the saunas because, it was at that space in Columbus at Ebb and Float. So that was really interesting too. And so I just would love to hear how you got to where you are now, right? This is something that I'm sure you haven't been doing your whole life. So just fill me in a little bit on what it is that you do for health, how did you get here? What's your business? You obviously do a lot of things with cooking, and have you worked as a chef or under a chef? So what's that background for you?
Yeah, so I really started I grew up eating just about how the average American does. It wasn't necessarily unhealthy. Like, my mom cooked a lot of meals, but we weren't going out of our way to be super healthy with what we ate. I was active. I was always in sports, but I was never the healthy guy or the really in shape guy. And when I moved away out of high school, I went to culinary school and started pursuing some rock climbing and things that were a little more active. And I actually ended up having knee surgery, meniscus surgery. I tore my meniscus, and then a year later tore the meniscus in my other knee on the same side. So
wow.
that happened. And through my physical therapy, it really sparked a lot of light bulbs for me, realizing how the way my feet worked, altered the way my hips were moving and the way everything was connected in our bodies. So that really got me deep into the exercise and movement side of health. So I started pursuing becoming a personal trainer and was listening and reading a lot of books about that. And that kind of slowly transitioned into living a more healthy life in the way I was cooking, because I was going to culinary school, but culinary is very just flavor based and not necessarily quality of ingredients and healthfulness. So I was working in a restaurant setting that was second shift. First shift, I was working a ton of hours. I was going to the gym all the time, but the life I was living and the culture in restaurants is not super conducive to a healthy lifestyle. So I was working out to make up for the poor relationship I had with food and work. So that really transitioned me into the healthy style of cooking. And I realized that I wasn't going to be able to stay in restaurants and keep living that quote unquote chef life, working 50, 60 hours a week, second shift. You would think as a chef, you're eating really good food, but you're really eating French fries and chicken tenders all the time. And, I was trying to work out, but you're just not getting the gains that you wanted, and things just aren't clicking and working out that way. So the healthy cooking, eliminating the fats, the bad oils and fats in my life, trying to get on a regular sleep schedule, that's when all that kind of started. Because like I was focused on health, but my environment and the work situation I was in was not very conducive to health. So I started reading a lot of books. Like the biggest one for me was Omnivore's Dilemma by Michael Pollan. That was a really good book. It talks a lot about like our food system, the foods we should be eating, and how all that kind of links to holistic health. I was really just kind of living like the exercise side of things and not addressing all the others.
Did that in
That really.
I was just going to ask, like,
Go ahead.
with that book, was that also contradicting things that maybe you had learned or you were talking about or hearing in culinary school or in your experience working in a kitchen?
Totally. I mean, in culinary school and in restaurants, you talk about like quality of product, but the quality just remains around flavor. And it's just like, oh yeah, look at this really awesome marbled piece of beef. Well, it's quality. It's like prime beef. Well, that cow didn't live a very good life. It wasn't fed the diet that it's naturally supposed to eat. Therefore, that quality of beef is not the quality that we really should be eating, and not the quality that I was interested in eating. So I had like gotten to the point where I was, instead of eating the eggs that we had at the restaurant and cooking myself breakfast, I was bringing my own eggs from the farm, my own butter to cook it in. Like I was really in a weird spot where I was like, all this food that I'm cooking and feeding people is not the food that I believe is what we should be eating. It felt so kind of wrong. And it's like the majority of the majority of restaurants, that's how they operate. It's quality products that aren't necessarily the quality that I'm looking for, right? Like animals raised in a certain way with the nutrient profile that they should have. And it all comes back to like the way they were raised.
And is that stuff that you learned just on your own? How you said you started reading books and listening to maybe podcasts, like those are things that you picked up on your own that you were like, wait a second. It almost seems like you were living in this parallel universe of like, we're here doing the same job, we're cooking the same food in theory, but like we're not really living in the same world over here.
Yeah, right. Joel Salatin was another really big influential author. He's a regenerative, like sustainable farmer who's a really prolific writer, and he has a bunch of awesome books. And the one that really hit home for me was Folks, This Ain't Normal. And it was just like a book breaking down all of the societal norms that we have, that we think of as normal, that are just so wrong and different to the way that people were even living like 100 years ago, right? Like most people were growing up on a family farm and they were growing a lot of their food, and if they weren't raising their food, they had a really close relationship to a farmer that they knew were raising their food in a certain way. And it even went into, restaurants and our relationships with eating out. I mean, so many people rely on restaurant food for the majority of the food that they eat in a week. And when the restaurants aren't able to use like the really good, fresh quality products, well, we're not getting what we need, like the good quality eggs, because an egg isn't necessarily an egg. So yeah, I was like, man, I'm in this restaurant feeding people, but I don't necessarily feel like I'm providing people with the best food that they could be getting, and I'm also not providing myself with like the best environment. And that's when I took a break and started working at a gym and doing the personal training.
That's cool.
Yeah, so it was like I need to get myself into a healthier environment, because I'm just kind of like barely staying afloat in this like healthy lifestyle I'm trying to live, right? I was working out to make up for the lack of a healthy environment.
Yeah. And like you said, that can only go so far, right? Like if you're not
Totally.
fueling yourself properly and, doing the things you need, like the hour in the gym a day, in the grand scheme of things, if you take that 30,000 foot view of the week or, the year,
Mm-hmm.
what is that 1 hour in the gym really doing compared to what you're doing outside of the gym? And that was a realization for me in my own health journey too, is I was trained to be a power lifter. And I don't know if you've seen me talk about that at any point, but I was trained to be a power lifter. I loved that. I loved lifting heavy, all this stuff, but I was also a classroom teacher. So I was getting up early. I was working out before work, taxing my adrenals from the very start, and then having a really stressful environment, working in special ed at school. And then I was just exhausted and pooped out. And I was doing that for years. And it was like, I wasn't doing anything outside of work or the gym. I wasn't walking. I wasn't doing any sort of functional movement in air quotes. And so it was like, well, how helpful is that hour in the gym, right? If I'm not really moving outside of that, then what good is this doing? So it sounds like you had that realization too of I could be going to the gym and doing all this stuff, but I'm not eating well. I'm not moving a lot outside of that. So how is that going to be helpful?
Totally. Yeah. And the gym was really great for me. It broke the cycle of staying up late and eating French fries while I was working the fry station all night. And I was able to get around people that were kind of living the same lifestyle I was trying to live. And I did the training for a little over a year, and really found that food was missing from my life. I wanted to get back into food, but I didn't necessarily know how to get back into it without going to a restaurant, because in culinary school, that's the path. You go to school or not, you work your rank, you work your way up through a restaurant, you become a chef. And basically the goal is I just want to dedicate my whole life to this restaurant. That's kind of the chef thing, right? You're working your way up, you're making all these sacrifices, you're doing what you need to do, you need to, be sleep deprived, and then now you're a chef, and now you're working 80 hours, and you're running a restaurant, and that's just not something that I wanted to do. So that was a little scary, but I knew that I wanted to get back into food. So the head chef at the restaurant I did my apprenticeship, he was the head chef for a new restaurant that was opening out in Johnstown. And at the time I was going to Copia Farm just as a customer, doing their little cute farm store where you can check yourself out and total everything up. And it's all in the honor system. And we were going to do hyper local food, bringing in producers, local producers and farmers. So I signed on as on the opening team, and we got 8 or 9 months in. We were doing awesome creative food. I was still working second shift, but the environment was better. We were bringing in ingredients that I really believed in, our brunches, and we were using Copia Farm eggs. We were getting chicken from a local guy from Covey Rise. We were getting beef from RL Valley. So we were bringing in really good product, and I felt good about the food I was serving people. And then COVID happened, right? And everything gets shut down. I was a personal trainer and a cook. So both of those businesses closed down within 3 days of each other. And I was collecting unemployment. And at the time had one family that I was doing some private chef stuff for. I was grocery shopping for them, going to their house and filling up their fridge full of a bunch of healthy meals. And so that was kind of my transition into the private chef, personal chef kind of stuff, where I was working for them. They had a friend that wanted me to come out. It kind of just slowly started to grow, and I built this little handful of families that I was able to cook for. And that's kind of what I've transitioned to. So I'm able to go to farms, get all the awesome ingredients that I believe in, that were raised the way I believe in, and support these local farmers, and getting to feed people that awesome, nutritious stuff, and still stay in food without having to work 11-hour days and second shift, and being around French fries all day. Because if I'm making French fries all day, I'm going to have a really hard time not eating them. I've got willpower, but French fries, they're just they're just the bomb. And, being around that stuff just made it so hard for me to
Yeah, and I
live the
think
life
it's
I
good that
wanted
you
to.
actually have awareness over that, right? Some people they don't have that moment that clicks, and so they're like, "Why is it so hard for me to not stop eating this?" And I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
"Well, do you keep buying it? Like, are you around it every day? It's gonna be kind of hard
Mm-hmm.
to not engage in
Totally.
that." I think it's awesome that it's like come full
Mm-hmm.
circle
Yeah. It's
for
in,
you with the whole food and like, the fitness and the
yep.
health, like, because you're
Yep.
also still serving your community by working for families or doing private chef stuff or private catering things. But then you also get your
Totally.
hands in on like the actual like farming side of it too, which I think is really, really cool. And I'd love to hear more about that because you do
Yep.
work at a farm, correct?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I do. Yeah. So during my time at Ghostwriter, I was also helping out on the farm on occasion. Just like, really, I was like that guy on Instagram that bugged them like monthly, like, hey, if you guys got any work, let me know. I'll come out and do it. Like, I'd love to come see the farm, blah, blah, blah. And they were like, I'm sure they get a ton of guys from the city that are like, oh yeah, I want to come work on a farm and play with animals and stuff. And, they probably were thinking like, oh, this guy doesn't know what he's getting himself into. But eventually they ended up letting me help out on the farm. And I was like collecting eggs, and they had 3,000 chickens out in mobile units. So we were doing like mobile pasture-raised eggs, moving the chickens to fresh pasture every other day. Throughout like my health journey, I was reading a lot of books about regenerative agriculture and how that makes for better food. The Third Plate by Dan Barber was another good book for me that was like all about sustainability, the effect that animals can have on the planet, how the animals raised in a way that they should provide like nutrients that humans need. So I really wanted to get a further glimpse into food. I knew that I wanted to keep cooking for people and keep staying around food, but even at Ghostwriter with all the local ingredients, the restaurant setting was still taking a toll on my health. I was working a second shift, and the farm life is super conducive to a healthy lifestyle because it's like you got to wake up before the sun rises, so you're getting like all that good morning sun, the circadian inputs. And then I was doing like 15,000 steps a day, sometimes before like noon, and I was out in the heat and sweating and getting all the vitamin D from the sun. So it was like I was really, really loving it. And I was also learning about how chickens should be raised and pigs, and I was getting to like milk cows, and we started a raw dairy program, and then I was getting to take all these ingredients that I was helping raise at the farm and turn them into awesome food at my house and get creative with them. And that was just kind of like this light bulb moment for me that I had never had in food. Because in culinary school, I was just like, all right, well, I'm destined to become a chef at a restaurant and work a ton of hours. And I was stuck because I knew that wasn't something that I wanted to do, but that was like the path that I was on. And the farm really
I love
changed a
that.
lot for me.
Let's get into the like how chickens should be raised and how pigs should be raised. Like, let's get into that because you have firsthand experience.
Mm-hmm.
And like I mentioned to you before we
Totally.
started recording, I had my farmer here in Cincinnati on, and we talked about regenerative agriculture and how you migrate the animals and the cattle and all of that. So, and why that's also beneficial for vegetables and other things. So, can you go into that and just explain why you
Mm-hmm.
do that? And you said you would move them every other day, and so like frequency of it, the benefits of it, and how
Mm-hmm.
that works on a day-to-day
Yep.
basis.
Yeah. So, when you have 3,500 chickens in a small little area, they're all pooping and peeing, and all of that like builds up, right? Like if you're not moving the chickens to new pasture, all that's going to build up in the area that they were in. And the rainwater, when it rains, it'll wash all that manure into like our water systems. And in contrast, like from moving chickens to fresh pasture every other day, you have these giant indoor confined animal facilities where they have 10,000 chickens in a giant barn and their manure is just building up, and they have all these you got to get rid of the waste. So there are these chickens living in these really highly toxic environments, breathing in bad air, not living life like a chicken should. A chicken should be able to be out in the grass, pecking at bugs, eating forage, moving around, being able to dust bathe, being under the sun, just like humans. I mean, chickens need a lot of the things that humans need: morning and daytime light. Like, they have a circadian rhythm as well. A really interesting thing on the farm was their use of artificial lights to kind of trick the chickens into maintaining a proper egg laying cycle. So a chicken goes through this thing called molting, where once a year they start to lose their feathers to grow new feathers for the next year, and their egg production slows down a lot. They'll even drop from 90% egg laying a day down to 30 or 40%. So that's really bad when you're running an egg business. So at the chicken farm, we used artificial light in the top of their coops to mimic days, mimic their circadian rhythm. So the artificial lights kind of tricked their bodies into not going into that molting cycle, so they would continue laying. And that was a big light bulb for me, because it's the same with us. Like, when we have artificial light, when the sun goes down, our body doesn't downregulate and get us ready for sleeping. And it kind of tricks our bodies into it too. So there was all these little lessons that I learned at the farm that were kind of ingrained in the way they ran things, that also contributed to the way humans should be doing things. And similar with the giant, the giant indoor farming operations, when you have a bunch of humans in a small, confined area like a city, people get kind of angry and uptight, and, it can be a high stress environment, and it's not super natural and conducive to a human's lifestyle. You have all these it's like a concrete jungle. You're not out in nature. You're not getting to express your true human attributes. So the thing at the farm is controlling the animals and allowing them, keeping them safe and healthy, obviously, and producing, but also letting them display their true animal habits. And that's something that they do at Copia Farm very well, letting the pigs roam the forests and forage for roots and tubers and, play in the dirt and play in the mud like pigs are supposed to. And that makes for a higher quality product, better tasting food.
So let's say you're at the
better
grocery store, and I think most people have caught on that going for a pasture raised egg carton is going to be ideal, but it actually goes a step further than that. From what you're saying, is it's great to be pasture raised, but you're saying you got to take it a step further, and they need to be regenerative would even be more ideal, because yes, it'd be great to be on the pasture, but are they confined in that one spot for days at a time, and they're basically inhaling their own poop and pee and all of that? So I think the marketing is so tough for people who aren't aware of this stuff. It's very confusing. So I understand why people don't really know what to do, because it can be very misleading.
Totally. Yeah, totally. And I mean, honestly, I always kind of say the best egg and the best product is going to be the egg or animal that you raised yourself, because there's really amazing farming practices out there that are the best available, but they might not be the optimal option, because there are still things that you need to do to run a business, right? Maybe giving corn and soy feed, because you have a lot of animals that are you're wanting to fatten up, and they won't be able to live off of just the forage, right? So you're still needing to supplement food. So yeah, it's all about finding the best product in your area. And that might be just like a normal old pasture-raised egg. That's way better than an animal that's been raised in, confinement. And, if you want to talk about like the gold standard of eggs, it's like the mobile pasture-raised. You always want to look for that mobile on the carton. And there's not a whole lot of people doing it really with these mobile units. It takes, I'll tell you, like firsthand, it takes a ton of effort. I mean, you have these giant units that are getting dragged by tractors every day, and it takes all of this human input that a giant confined operation doesn't require. All of the human input has been outsourced to machines and efficiencies that require less people for the operation, but ultimately you're trading like a lower quality product for the lack of labor that's required for it. So these these operations, the mobile pasture-raised operations, they take a whole lot more human input and human labor, thus making a more expensive product. But, you're employing people and getting people out on the land, and I think a whole lot of people could benefit from getting out on a farm a couple of times a week and
absolutely
really seeing what it's like. It's really eye-opening.
It's funny, when I was teaching, there was a lesson we were doing. I was doing like my internship with young kids, and there was a question that was like, where does milk come from? And two kids answered it very differently. One kid said it comes from the store on the corner of the street, and another kid said it comes from a cow at grandma's farm. So it's like a lot of times we really don't think we're so disconnected from where our food does come that it's hard to remember, like, this actually took a lot of labor to get this milk or get these eggs in this carton or get this beef ground up and put into the grocery store. And having that connection, I think, could be very valuable for a lot of people on multiple levels.
Totally.
It sounds like it has been for you. Like it really did help bring you closer and almost gave you more of a reason or like motivation to continue to improve your health, because you saw firsthand the effort and the love that goes into raising these animals and the land that they live on and how they are raised.
Yep. Yeah. Working on the farm, it really did change my life. I was one of those people that I didn't know where different steaks came from on the animal. I didn't even really think about a steak coming from an animal, truthfully, or it being like a cross cut of a muscle. I really didn't know where food came from or how it was raised. You just go buy it at the grocery store. I was so disconnected. And I think the vast majority of people kind of live that way. And it's just a result of modern society and so many people living in cities. And even farmers, there's even new generations of farmers that are kind of disconnected from what's really important in food. They've been pressured into farming corn, wheat, and soy, or these giant chicken operations, because the price of food has been artificially suppressed by these styles of farming, right? So when you have this giant barn with 10,000 chickens in it, and it only requires 2 humans to look over those 10,000 chickens, well, you can sell a whole chicken processed for $5. But when you're raising chickens out on a pasture and it takes 20 humans and all this kind of nuance and finesse and manipulating the weather and, you're managing lives, it really takes a whole lot more effort. And the food we're paying for should cost so much more than what it does. I read this interesting statistic that there was a poll taken in the 1950s, and roughly 19% of the American salary was spent on food and 9% was spent on healthcare. And then they redid the poll in 2015 and the two numbers have flip-flopped. So we're paying 9% for our food and 19% on healthcare. And I really don't think that's a coincidence. We're eating way more low quality food, thus having to pay more for it long term afterwards, because we're sicker and, we're not
Right.
getting the
You talk a lot
nutrients
about
and
that on your
support that we
Instagram
need
just
from
day
our
to
food
day, and you
system.
have really great educational reels and other things like on your actual feed, which are super entertaining. So I love when you do that. Yeah. But it's important because,
Hmm.
yeah, people need to hear
Thanks.
that. And
Thanks.
it's
Totally. I'm having
because
fun with
again,
them.
we're so disconnected. And I think people are
Hmm.
starting to slowly wake up, right? At least I'd hope. Um, but you're right. It was a hard transition for
Yeah,
me to start
totally.
paying for higher quality meat because I'm like, oh, I don't know. Like I have this budget I want to stick to. But the reality was is I
Hmm.
had to do my options of like, well, what's the alternative? If I stick with what I'm buying now and I still feel like crap, well, if I just switch, maybe I will feel better and it'll be worth that because then I won't be spending money at the doctor. I won't be spending money on like these basically these supplements that aren't doing anything for me in the first place because I could get it from food. And so it was like I had to weigh my options of do I
Hmm.
pay more for
Yeah.
it now and have better health
Hmm.
outcomes so the return of investments can be way higher later, or do I pay for cheap food now and then I still end up feeling like crap for years on
Hmm.
end and just continue in this like kind of rat race or this circle, this negative feedback loop of not feeling well because I'm not eating well, I'm not moving well. So it really does come into play. So I love that you emphasize the food so much. And one thing that I've been really appreciating and I've personally been
Totally.
getting into as well is the organ meats. And I know that you consume organ meats. You talk a lot about that. When did you start looking into that and
Hmm.
eating that and consuming all of that for
Yeah.
yourself?
So Paul Saladino is somebody that I started following on Instagram. He's like, I think his handle's like Carnivore MD or something like that. And he was talking about all the benefits. And I had been at that point already eating like higher quality beef, looking for the grass fed stuff. And I was also taking like lots of multivitamins and supplements. And I was realizing that a lot of these organ meats, like especially grass fed beef liver and heart, have a lot of those nutrients that I was eating already in my supplements and like in a much more bioavailable form, like much more easily absorbed by our bodies and like a much more robust profile. So these supplements that I were taking, maybe like it had like, I don't even know how much quercetin and zinc and vitamin A, but then like 2.5 ounces of beef liver had way more than that. And that kind of made me realize like, oh, this makes sense, right? Like my grandma ate liver and onions. My grandma on my other side ate tons of beef heart and liver and onions. And like their moms for sure were eating liver, liver and heart and all the offal. And you look at tons of other cultures, like a lot of Asian cultures that are, these ancient cultures that have been around for thousands of years, they're eating beef tendons and hearts. And I mean, they just have a so much more robust and diverse diet than us. And it's no coincidence that all these blue zones are in these Asian countries and all these centenarians, all these people living for like 100+ years. It's not necessarily just like the environment that they're in, but it's the foods that they're eating, and especially all these like super nutrient dense organ meats. And I was also really into like the sustainability aspect of eating and how wasteful like our food system is. I think 40% of the food produced in the United, or maybe in the world, goes to waste and ends up in landfills. I mean, it's like a staggering number. And beef and heart is just not something, it's something that's wasted. It's going into dog food. And I really just started buying it up from these farm markets that I was going to and practicing and playing with different preparation methods. And I was having a lot of fun with it. And yeah, I've just like developed a diet that
Yeah. So is
incorporates
that
organ meats
how
in,
often? So are
in
you having
every
them every
week,
day
just
or is it
about.
more of a weekly basis?
I mean, it's definitely multiple times a week. It kind of depends. We just had some like, I usually make like big batches of stuff and kind of freeze it and make it easier on myself. So I like to keep frozen pate, like beef liver pate. Last night we had some red sauce that I made with tomatoes I grew last season and froze, and I did like an organ blend in it. So it was like 50% heart and liver to 50% ground beef. And And it's really cool because there's so many products coming out now. It's become such a popular thing that you can buy a lot of, like, Force of Nature is a really popular one. They have like an ancestral blend with organ meats in it. And it's really cool. I mean, it's becoming more popular, and there's really a big change in the food
I think
system.
the more people
I
hear
think
that
it's
it's
really,
not
and
some
really
weird woo-woo
important for
thing that
people to be
like
eating
other
more of.
cultures or societies do, like it is very beneficial. And that's what I've been doing, is the Force of Nature. I found that at Whole Foods, which before you could only get it online. So seeing it in stores is really inspiring too. So I've been doing that.
Mm-hmm.
And same thing. I grew up
Totally.
where I'm
Yep.
Greek. And so, especially around Easter, what happens is we cook a lamb, we roast a lamb in a spit, or on a spit for Easter. But you also, you don't waste any of the lamb. So like you would be eating you'd put the tongue, you'd put the organs in a soup, and you have that as well. And I always thought that was so gross growing up. Like, ew, I can't believe Dad is eating that. But now I'm like, shoot, give me some of that. Like, I want to try that. So it's totally different how
Mm-hmm.
your perspective changes, and you realize, like, wait a second,
Yeah. Yeah.
these people knew what they were doing, and we've just removed ourselves. Like, we're the ones that are lost. They knew what was the right thing. So I almost,
Yes.
when I work with clients, I'm always like, we need to get back
Yes.
to how we were supposed to live
Mm-hmm.
and how we were supposed to eat, right? Our ancestors knew what was doing. We make
Yeah.
things confusing with like
Mm-hmm.
all of our
Yep.
technology, which is great, and we need that, and it's helpful. But if you get rid of all that, you trim that fat, at the core, what were your ancestors doing? Because they were living longer, and not just were they living longer, they were mobile when they were living longer. They weren't cooped up in a nursing home at 80. So
Mm-hmm. Totally. 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 Yeah, living longer and healthier lives, right? That, seeing that like soup, that, the organ soup, it's like, wow, that makes me really want to like explore more of my Greek culture. And it's like, my grandparents as well, like an Italian culture, they're like cooking with like neck bones and fortifying their red sauces with all these different, these different soup bones and tendons, and they're boiling the whole animal, and they're extracting all those nutrients. And it wasn't some like trendy fad like it is now. Like back then, people were it was just out of necessity. It's like, why would you waste this liver? They weren't thinking like, oh yeah, I'm gonna get tons of vitamin E from eating this liver. They were just like, no, this is just how you live. This is how you eat. It wasn't even a thought back then. It was just the norm. And we need to figure out a way to reverse engineer our lives, because things have gotten too easy and too convenient. And, we were able to get by with eating like the same 5 steaks out of a cow and not thinking about the rest of the animal.
I
And
know.
that
And
is
I think
just,
there's that benefit to
that's
it as
just
well.
so
Like when we
incredibly
do think
unsustainable.
about just how wasteful it is. I mean, I started composting about a year, maybe, yeah, probably like a year ago. It was some point during COVID. I don't know. It's all kind of a blur. And the amount of scraps that I accumulate when I'm cooking, I'm mortified that I would throw that in the
Mm-hmm.
trash before. I mean, it's awful. And I even have a little garden in my backyard that I'm like, this is like, it's the circle,
Totally.
right? Like I'm
Totally.
having my own
Mm-hmm.
compost now. I have my own soil, and I can grow this, and then and then
Cool.
I eat it, and then I use those scraps to do it again. And
Mm-hmm.
it just changes your perspective. And I think it
Mm-hmm.
improves, or I guess it increases your appreciation for
Yep.
nature and food and what the earth is already providing to us, and that it really is simple. We're the ones that make it complicated.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Totally. Yeah, we're overcomplicating things. In a way, progression is good, but we've progressed so far that we've taken any real hard work or true connectedness to like our natural world. Like we live in cities and drive cars, and we're so disconnected from our food system, and part of that is just like the way we've progressed into making things so easy and convenient. We got to figure out a way to kind of pull those curtains back a little bit, get people out working on the land, get people connecting with their farmers again. Just like reconnecting to the things that are truly
Yeah.
important, rather than like what the cool show is on Netflix, or I mean we've totally, it's scary to think that like if my generation, our generation of people don't start to learn how to cook for themselves, even cooking can be like become a lost art. The vast majority of people my age are not like cooking on a regular basis for themselves. We've made eating out so easy and affordable, which personally I don't think it should be as affordable as it is. I mean, I think that like food prepared for us in a restaurant setting should be much more expensive. Everybody involved can get paid more, and the farmers can get more value for the animals that they're raising. And I think that eating out should be more of a special occasion rather than, you know, such a norm that it is. And that's just like another disconnect from our food system that, you know, we're all not really thinking too much about. Foods become so readily available. And like going back to eating the organ meats and stuff, since we're producing so much food, we have that ability now to be kind of picky and pick and choose with what we eat and how we eat it. We're living in like an environment of food abundance rather than the last, you know, the entire human evolution before the last like 200, 150 years, we've been living in food scarcity. And we've just been eating out of necessity. Well, now we've progressed so far that we're like confused and have this ability to like pick and choose what we ate.
Ketchup to choose from, or the amount of cereals. Like, it's just, there's too much. I think that's why it's so confusing for people, is because, and everything, right? Like, we're human. We have these impulses, or we have these vulnerabilities, or these cravings, or these biochemical reactions that, yes, we're going to be drawn to sugar. So it is hard to get out of that. So when you see a whole bunch of things that are sugar filled and they're being marketed as being healthy, which is a whole nother topic and conversation, it's like, this is why it's difficult for some people to get, like, to optimize their health and to really get back on, or get back to where we should be, because it is really difficult and it's confusing and everything is too readily accessible, like you said.
Yep. Yeah, totally. It's, I mean, there's bio-individuality to like what we should be eating, but it really is pretty simple. It's like, how were we eating 200 years ago? Well, we need to do more of that. Like, just, you know, like, period. Right? I mean, like we love to like overcomplicate things and make all these fad diets, and you need to be tracking your macros and your macros, and what are the best carbohydrates, what are the worst carbohydrates, what are the best fats, what, like, it's like we just need to take a page out of the book of like the way our grandparents were eating and do more of that. I mean, you know, it's I think nutrition is one of like the most overcomplicated things that could truthfully just be so simple.
I'd love to hear more about, you kind of had this awakening for yourself of, you know, oh, I want to, you know, you were working in the restaurant, you were realizing like, this isn't necessarily aligning with what I want my future to look like. I'm not feeling very well. I'm tempted. I'm having all this, you know, these fries, and I'm working out at the gym, but it's not necessarily helping me out in the gym. So what are, like, from making those changes, if you started bringing your own food to the restaurant, you got out of that space and started working at the farm and doing more like private stuff, what are these other changes or habits that you've built into your life that you feel like optimizes your health and just continues to, you know, inspire you to be healthy and have, you know, better wellness outcomes?
Yeah. Yeah, so a lot of it's like around food based. Like, I started playing around with the intermittent fasting, and I was always one of those big like wake up and, you know, crush some toast and a bunch of eggs, or like oatmeal. I was a huge oatmeal dude. Like, I was starting every day with, you know, a big old bowl of oatmeal, and never giving my body like time to rest and kind of recover. And my body was just always like in this digestive cycle where I was always just using all this energy to digest my food. So intermittent fasting is something that I use. I usually try and go like between 12 and 16 hours of not eating. And then I'll just like pack all my calories and food in about an 8-hour window. That's been super helpful for me. also getting like movement in the morning. Honestly, the morning walks and like the morning light has been something that's been new for me. I've been doing the blue light blockers at night, but was never really getting up early to see that morning light. And this like viewing the morning light and the evening light has honestly made like the biggest impact on my health that I've noticed out of anything. Just like sleeping on a regular schedule. I can go to bed at the same time. I'm in bed by like 9:30 p.m. and waking up without an alarm every morning around the same time. I really think like this light, the light cycle in our way our digestion and our sleep wake cycle lines up with the sun has been really interesting. It really sparked interest for me when I was at the farm, like starting work at 6:30 in the morning or 7 a.m. before the sun rises and using the headlamp and like exhausting all my energy throughout the day and then actually being tired at night. Like so many people go throughout the day sitting under fluorescent lights and wondering why they can't sleep at night. It's like, well, they've been like, you're being like inundated with all this unnatural fluorescent light and lack of exercise. So getting proper sun exposure throughout the day has been important for me, and really like taking the amount of light that artificial light that I'm exposed to throughout the day. I take that very seriously. Like I used to be religious with my blue light blockers, but I would like not wear them around certain people because, you know, it's like, do I really want to have this conversation with everybody that I meet? I'm like this weirdo with the red glasses on, but I just embrace it now. Like, you know, I'll like have fun with it, call them my 3D glasses or whatever. Or if the person really cares, like, you know, I'll explain to them. And most people, like, they have that light bulb that goes off too. Like, it's really just become such an important part of my day using those blue light blockers and viewing the light that
I love that.
You know, I'm just,
I've seen
I'm all in, man. Like, you know, no shame at all wearing those blue light blockers.
That is awesome. Like, good for you, because like, if in anything, it can become a teachable moment, like you said, for people who are open and willing to hear that. But you're also giving other people permission to take their health seriously. Like, if they're like, well, shoot, like Lorenzo doesn't care what other people think, and like he's gonna sleep really well tonight because he has his blue light blockers on. So like, why do I care what other people think? Like, you're giving them that permission of, doesn't matter. And let's be honest, like those glasses, we're talking about the amber tinted ones. So I talk about those, I have those. And so these are the glasses we're talking about, not the ones that look like, you know, actual glasses. So these are noticeable. And again, like these probably, some people probably just think, oh, that's just a trendy thing he's doing anyways. That's a style thing, right? Like celebrities wear interesting things all the time. So they might be thinking that. So I just love that you're not letting that stop you from doing what you need to do.
Yeah. Yeah, not at all. It's all about, you know, it's about that like reverse engineering. You know, you gotta find a way to combat some of this like unnatural environment that we're living in, and those blue light blockers are an awesome way to do it. This, my buddy Andrew, who I've been doing a lot of dinner parties with, he runs the Roy's Ave Supper Club. We're learning a lot from each other, and he just ordered himself a pair of the blue light blockers. So building a little tribe of the red light glasses, and you know, it's just something fun, and it's just great to finally feel like I can embrace the health journey that I'm on, and not feel ashamed for doing something that's good for me. You know, nobody should feel like it's so, because people are so disconnected from what's important. When you're the healthy guy, you're the weird one, and you can feel like you're the odd one out, you know. But you know, I always encourage people to just like embrace that weirdness. People will kind of learn from your tendencies. You can make it a learning moment, or you can just, you know, in the back of your head think like, no, this is good for me. This is something that I know is important to living a healthy life. And just like call it at that. Don't worry about what other people are thinking. You know, at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. Like, and also you got some sweet red glasses on, and embrace that. You know, you look like you're unique and different and awesome. And, you know, you're doing good things for yourself.
I love
So
it. I love it
I just
because
am all in, and
you're so right in that.
I could care
And I
less
think
if I'm
that
getting
one thing that
judged
I
for my
want to
red
compliment
glasses.
you on that I find, um, admirable and I really appreciate because I try to be this way as well is you're very consistent with your habits, right? I can always count on seeing your story of you're out there getting that morning light too, right? You're wearing your blade blockers, you're cooking, you're doing this stuff, you're at the
Mm-hmm.
gym, you're doing the sauna. How did that? I think people really struggle with the
Yeah,
consistency. So
totally.
what would be a tip for you if someone who's like, I really want to get into some of this
Mm-hmm.
stuff, but I'm having trouble with the habits sticking. I can't have it be consistent. What
Hmm.
would be your advice or how did that work out for you?
Yeah. Well, now at this point, it's taken me so many years to get here, Like, I didn't just start a bunch of habits. I didn't start being consistent with a bunch of things all at one time. It has been a very slow progression. I've been in and out of my habits. I've been consistent. I've been really inconsistent with some things, but it's just been this slow, natural progression. So I just started with like little bits. You got to like start with very small things that are actionable and easy to do every day. And the gym for me, it's honestly, it's like a way, I found it to be a way that like I deal with like pent up emotions or whatever. Like I get, I feel better after the gym and I recognized that. So that was something that was really beneficial for me to do consistently. I've always been a gym goer consistently, but sauna use, it's the same thing. It's like I'll do something consistently and feel so good after doing that thing. I just get like I get hooked. I get hooked to that feeling. Like I will never stop going to the sauna 4, 5, 6, 7 days a week. Like I just feel so good after it. I know how good it is for me, and that has been the big game changer for me. I think that it can be hard to be consistent. Like I understand that some morning, like this morning, it was like what? It felt like negative 22 degrees. I did not want to go outside, but I knew how good it was going to be for me. And I knew that if I didn't go outside and did the thing, I would feel way worse about the situation that I was in, whatever it was. And I would feel guilty for not getting out there and doing that thing. So it's like, for me, it's just like showing up for myself, holding myself accountable by posting it on Instagram, and hopefully putting out some of that energy. Like, hey,
Yes,
sometimes
exactly.
I know it's hard to believe that sometimes you just have to do things that you don't want to do. Like, like, I did not want to go to the gym this morning and I did not want to wake up early to go on a walk. But I knew that if I was just like pulling my tired butt out of bed before we got on this podcast to do this recording, I would be like sleepy and groggy and I'd be like, it's 9 a.m. already. I haven't done anything with my morning. I would just kind of feel guilty. So this consistency has purely just been bred out of the way I
Yeah, I
feel,
love it. It's
how
the
good I
delayed
feel after I
gratification,
do the
right? Like I think
things that I know are
we're
good
in a
for me and showing up
society
for
that
myself.
everything is so fast, everything is so readily available to us. And it's like if you don't
Mm-hmm.
people want to feel good now, and so maybe sleeping in feels good now, but it's not going to feel good later when you haven't moved all day because you went from bed to laptop back to bed. So it's like I love that you brought up that you think of almost like what the end goal is. The end goal is to feel good, feel confident about yourself,
Exactly.
feel like you've
Yep.
accomplished something. And that means sometimes doing things that you don't want to do because guess what? We are adults and we do that all the time. Like I never want to bring in the trash cans when after trash night, but I do it, right? Like I don't want to do a lot of things that I do
Yeah.
every single day. And I don't want
Mm-hmm.
to lift every single time I'm at the gym,
No.
but I keep thinking, why am I doing this? Oh,
Yeah.
because I want to be
Totally.
resilient, because I know that my body needs this. It's good for my
Totally.
immune system. It's good for my hormones. Like you have to get out of your head and get out of your own way. Like, and you
Mm-hmm.
just have to like suck it up, honestly, and just do it because you know it's good for your health.
Totally. It is. Yep. Yeah. I mean, it goes back to like our environment and how easy and how many options we're inundated with. Like life has become so convenient that we need to reverse engineer our lives and make things more inconvenient. Truthfully, I mean, like parking in the furthest parking spot at the grocery store is one that I like to do. It's like that just adds a couple hundred extra steps onto my daily step count. Or, going on these walks, because you can live your whole life just like not getting movement, not moving your body, not eating the right foods because it's the convenient thing to do. Mm-hmm. And it is. I think it's like harder to live a healthy lifestyle now because of how convenient things have become. But if you're able to find those little consistencies throughout your day, it's not even about going to the gym for like an hour a day. I think you could have more benefit doing like 4 little mini things, 4 little mini workouts that are 10 or 15 minutes long that are just like scattered throughout your day. It's about these like little inputs that all add up throughout the day. I'm not doing like one big walk every day. I'm doing like three 30-minute walks throughout the day. Small little actionable steps that you can take that don't take that much time or effort. And just finding a way to be consistent with those. Eating, like I cook every single day. I've always got a million projects going on. I think that's another thing that like we've lost connection with, is like preparing our foods, because we spend so little time preparing our own foods. We have all this extra time to like feel sad and anxious, and we like bored, right? Like we're like, what do you mean you're bored? Like there's so many things that you could be doing right now. It's like we need to reverse engineer and do the small little mundane tasks that used to be so
and
necessary for
such
humans
a good
that are
example
now
of that
just
on your
kind of been
Instagram of
bred out of our lives.
It's almost like you can expect to see what we see, right? We know he's going to be at the gym. We know he's going to sauna. We know he's going to cook his food, and that's nice because again, I think it also gives an example of like this is doable and this isn't boring, and you can find joy in it. You have to change your perspective. If you think that this is going to suck and that it's going to be boring and it's not going to be flavorful, then yeah, it's probably going to be like that. So I like that you provide that example. And you said that you always have projects going on. So in terms of, I want to ask you in terms of like cooking and preparing, what services do you offer in that aspect of your work?
Yeah. So right now I'm doing mostly in-person cooking, where I'm, working with families. We're kind of curating menus together, coming up with recipes. A lot of it's like dietary restrictions. So I have a lot of people on autoimmune protocol diets, people that are like totally gluten-free, a lot of dairy-free people, and just working with them and building menus to fill their fridge for however many meals that we agree on, whatever it is. So I have a handful of families that I work for doing that. And then I'm working on the farm. And I also work with my buddy Andrew, who's doing in-person, like in-home private dinner parties. So we're doing really cool kind of like high-level menus. I've been helping him out with those. I would like to start doing some of my own in-person like dinner parties, kind of more farm forward, where I'm bringing in and featuring local farmers and products like that. But yeah, my main focus right now is the in-person working with families, kind of the private chef thing. It's been a really awesome way to like still be around food, still do food, and be able to incorporate like a healthy environment and a healthy lifestyle into it as well.
To
building relationships with
buy
people.
in or respect or adhere to what you would suggest, because they know that you're doing it and obviously works because you're feeling great and you're living that lifestyle too. For someone who's not local to you, is there like family planning in that way? If they want to talk about menus or what to stock their fridge with, do you do that virtually as well, or is it just in person at this point?
At this point, it's just in person, but I would like to figure out a way to pull some business virtually as well. I think it'd be cool to do some like consulting work where I'm just kind of, pantry cleanouts would be a really fun thing where we're talking about like different alternative brands. And because that's something that I've really like learned a lot about is like, I grew up eating all the kind of typical like ketchups and sauces and chips. And, a lot of these people aren't ready to like totally take chips out of their life. So what are some better options that we can, what are some better chip options, or, what are these alternatives that we can sub in for those things that you really love, but are not necessarily loving you back. Food education too is something that I really want to focus on a lot more this year. These cute little videos that I'm putting out, I'm having a lot of fun doing those. I'd like to kind of ramp that up a little bit more, maybe find a way for like longer format, more in-depth videos where people can go to like a website, check those things out, maybe do some online cooking classes, things like that.
Yeah,
so
I'm excited to see all that.
Got a lot of plans and a lot of stuff
really
that I would like to put in motion, just figuring out
kind of how to what you post. And I'm going to definitely link your Instagram and all of that in the show notes so people can find you. I'd love to ask you, we talked a lot about like what you do for health, ways that other people can maybe implement some of the things we talked about. At the end of every episode, I ask the guest to give the listeners a health challenge. So what would your health challenge be for this week for everyone who is listening?
I think if you can cook one more meal than what you already do this week, that for me has done more for my health than I think anything. It's just cooking more for myself. Like buy a cookbook, pick a recipe out of it that you've never done before, and just learn through trial and error. Like it might not go as planned. It might not turn out exactly how you want it to, but you're learning along the way. And we really need to get back into like cooking for ourselves and learning how to navigate the kitchen.
So that's a challenge for this week.
That really is such an important aspect of living.
I might try switching up and maybe
lifestyle.
Making something that I've seen you make or you talk about. Because I pretty much always cook my own food, but maybe switching it up would be an extra step for me who's already pretty routine and eating at home. But that's a great challenge. So let us know how you're doing that. Can you let everyone know how they can find you on your social media or wherever they can contact you?
Yeah. Yep. So I'm it's Lorenzo Cooks on Instagram. I also have a website. It's cheflorenzocooks.com. You can shoot me a DM. I have a page on my website where you can.
That sounds good. I will link both.
Put in some information, a little message, and we can work together that way.
This is really fun.
Yeah. It's just the website and Instagram.
Awesome.
Thank you so much for tuning into this episode. I so appreciate your interest in holistic health and hope you learned something you can apply to your own life. References from this episode are linked in the show notes, as well as links to find me, Evie, on social media platforms. If you'd like to learn more about services from Holistically Restored, click on the link in the show notes. I'd love to hear from you. If you enjoyed this content, I encourage you to subscribe and also leave a review on Apple Podcast. Until next time, be well, my friends.